Okay, so we've just hit the autumn interphase at the beginning. And that means we'd use the seasonal turn. There are no force pool additions. We don't have anything there. We've got some troops coming on that are recorded here for September, but that's in the turn itself, and they'll actually show up on the board. So we're not going to be adding anything to our force pools, but we do have some stuff we can build. Now we figure out our resources. All right. I can look at it here, but it's easier if I have the rules for this, because I've only been through this, I think, once. As I said, I didn't play any of the scenarios all the way through. Okay. And when was I? Oh yeah, the first. Okay. All right. So one of the issues is that first season here. Now, one thing I have to do is I have to look up. I know some of the starts affect that. So I'm going to have to find what my start was. Mine was this horrible situation. I don't see any effects on the income. I know some of them affect the income. Alright. So, the first thing we have to do is posting, which is just looking at these. The first season of the game, Austria is going to get $6. For the rest of the game, they get 12. And the only modifier to this, it's not, we're not going to lose points, I think, for territories taken, but we lose points for the demoralization. So, since I spent all my money with Austria, we have $6. Britain gets 11. Not really sure they do. Not sure where I am based on what is first season listed as. Yeah, they're not going to generate any additional money. They just sit there. And I'll probably take them off the board if it becomes obvious they're not entering for a while. France pulls 8. Germany gets a big 16. And Russia gets 8, but an additional 3 because the Ottomans aren't in the game. Or not yet. So that puts us to 11. Now, that's an interesting factor to keep in mind. Because the Ottomans don't enter until after Britain does. Which means Russia's going to be getting an improved income for the entirety of the game. I still think that it's worth keeping Britain out for as long as I kind of reasonably can. And then as Russia's on the point of collapse, that's when I try to punch through in France. I'll try to position myself in the best place I can in terms of France before I don't want to get close to Paris, though. I mean, if something happens where the next turn it looks like I can make it to Paris, I'll do that because then I can conquer France, and that puts them in a much worse position. But it's not something I'm looking forward to in terms of, I don't want to bring Britain into the war. France will keep fighting, by the way. Conquered is kind of a minor status. Okay. So now where are we after that? Now we have the ability to destroy both fortresses and naval units if we needed more activity points. I don't feel like anybody can dare do that at this point. Reducing you can reduce a fortress and get a point. sorry, 2 points, and you can reduce a naval unit by a step and get a number of points that it would cost to procure that step, which I think is 2 as well, but I'm not sure. And then you can also buy yourself Africa points. Now this is an interesting idea, and one where I cheated. I moved this, and well, I'm allowed to move it, yeah. So yeah, the French actually moved on the Africa map. So that's an interesting question. Do the Germans feel like they need Africa points down here? And these things indeed do entrench, which is a thought. Unless I attack Portugal, the Germans don't think they're going to need any. The French, however, would like to gain some ground there, so they're going to spend one of their resource points and get themselves 3 Africa points. You don't get any for free. Germany gets 3 additional action points for their Africa territory. And that is just, they get it. I'm sorry, 3 Africa points they get for free. France does not. Okay. People could send money to one another. I don't see anybody willing to do that. And now we get requisition. If we conquered a capital, we would get points. Nobody's conquered a capital yet, even a minor. Friendly miners allocated to it. The Russians, I allocated Serbia to them, so they'll get an extra point. You get RPs for population centers taken from the other player. Now this is kind of the opposite of what I would think. I would think that you would reduce the resources of a player whose population centers you've taken over and maybe get some. Instead you just gain, and you, I don't think, lose. We'll see. Nobody has 3 population centers, though, I don't believe. Let me make sure population centers are what I think they are. They may just be... Okay, 1.22 doesn't talk about that, which is where I was sent. There is definitely some problem with this, but maybe it says here. Here we go. A city, port, fortress on the map or sea chart. So you can see where that's kind of a pain. That's something that there's no way to track easily, and you're going to have to be counting on the map constantly. I didn't realize how annoying that was going to be. All right, and in the wrong area. Okay, there were no air raids. Nobody has any bombers, so there will not be any air raids, is what I'm saying. Resource production reductions. Raids, submarine warfare, and surface raiders, blockade, conquest of Stockholm, demoralization. The French have a demoralization against them, so they get hit with one. And revolution. The track can't go below 0. Nobody's got any ships out to do submarine warfare. That can only be done against the Brits, right? Yeah. The surface raiders, I can't use them except against the Brits. How about a blockade? Yeah, I don't have enough ships to blockade. These would be... What is this? A blockade has the same effect. There's no additional penalty to a nation. So these are going to be losses. It should say reduction, not production, I guess. I don't know. Stockholm can only be a British submarine. We did the demoralization, so that's that. And then we'll move the turn marker up to September. I'm sorry for how long this is taking. It's just, I kind of want to get it right. Kinda. And now we go to the monthly turn. And diplomacy's first, but there's no possibility of diplomacy. France has entered the war. Well, there's the possibility that Britain would enter at this point, but and now we go to construction. And procurement and repair tells us what we pay. So if the Serbians lost a unit, once per year they get to rebuild it. So they're going to be building a unit. And for free. They get to muster that. Let's see. In any friendly controlled in-supply population center or home country port boxes in their home country. Shadow governments muster in their home, in their host, if they wish. It doesn't say may, but all right. So let's see. Let me go get the units that are coming in. These are the freebies that are coming in. I'm getting a little bit of French and a leader, a whole pile of Russian additional units, an Austrian, and Ludendorff and his stack, who are definitely going to go over in the east because I want to beat up the Russians. This is a little weird because honestly, the Tannenberg situation, this is as close as you can come to it, and already the reinforcements are showing up. It feels like they should show up maybe in the second fortnight or something, but again, the game avoids putting a lot of special rules into play. And where you might see something like that, they just kind of gloss over it and say, you know, it's not that, it's not worth complicating the whole thing just to make sure some special cases get right, which I think is far superior to games which just burden themselves down with special cases. Okay, so these are going to get placed, and at the same time I'm going to make my purchase decisions, perhaps. For the purchase decisions, let's look at what I have. Nobody lost any leader, or nobody has any leaders to bring in. Minor core, no. Infrastructure is an interesting possibility, and we want to consider that. So over here, we're fine advancing along the rail lines. But up here, we're starting to see some entrenchment. So there's some reason for infrastructure for the trench bonus, for being able to attack with an additional +1. And we may see it for that reason. And there are also some weird little places where the rail lines don't go. I don't think it's that big a deal, but for example, if the French wanted to advance to here, they wouldn't be in supply still. It's generally the Germans who get hurt by this, especially going through southern Belgium, where they have to build their rail lines out. Also the crossing here, kind of tricky. There's like just a couple entry points that actually work. But I don't see myself making those attacks. The ones I'm kind of interested in right now are trying to devolve, trying to break the front out a little bigger out here. I can't take San Quentin, so maybe I'll be slipping up this way, and it's possible I might need, you know, an infrastructure hex somewhere, although there's rail lines through all of this now. That looks pretty safe. And I think that's about it. Okay. Mines, well, they're all already deployed, so I don't have any additional ones in my force pool I can build. Tanks, no. regular units we already talked about. And, well, we haven't really talked about 2 per corps. So that's a big expense. The Germans probably want to. They want to rebuild their good units. But on the other hand, we have limited amounts of money. You know, that's going to mean less activity on the attacking. The French probably need to because their lines don't look very powerful. No fortresses are damaged, are they? Well, Serbia's fortress is damaged. Let me see what the requirement here. Only a major power can repair fortresses. So, forget that. We have no air units, subs and U-boats, cost of surface ships. Okay, so I guess we just figure out how much to buy. Purchasing what I can. The French had to go down buy a 3 and then they could buy a 2. The 3 was interesting. This is the yellow print counter. In the darker light I couldn't see that. It shows up better for me on the gray counter, I guess, a little bit, or maybe just positioning or whatever. I don't know. I knew there was one, but I was looking at that particular counter and I could not see it last night. It's actually, there are a number of factors to do with the graphical presentation in terms of the font used, etc., that I find these particularly difficult to read for the size of the number they are. This is something Compass has done before in games that I've seen. I really didn't like their handling of the fonts over in the God Kings. You know, it wasn't the worst problem in the game, but it may be in this one. And it does definitely decrease your enjoyment of play when it's difficult to read the counters to see the information they're intended to convey. Anyway, it's not so bad maybe on the white print here. Maybe these are worse. Yeah, these I find very, very difficult to read. Now, with the camera it looks fine, but with my eyes out about here, I can't tell. You know, it looks like a squiggle. But my eyes aren't good. I still haven't placed my Russians, but you can see I've got Ludendorff up here. I reinforced. The Austrians bought themselves a unit. I doubt the Russians are going to buy. They have nothing to buy. The French really can't afford to buy more. I spent on 2 units any more than that, and I would not have. So I have $3 left. $1 is enough for me to sail my fleet around and do what I should have done before. Try to get these Africans back to France. I should have had my fleet in the Mediterranean for that purpose, but whatever. The other money is kind of the, hey, if I get an RP expenditure, I don't want to lose a unit for it, right? $1 is a lot cheaper than 2 for a unit, so I'd rather be able to channel that in. But with the Russians, I don't know where I'm going to place them. Looking things over, somewhere there was a transport table for how many people can move what. I have this written up. I don't remember. Oh no, it is here. Yeah, the 5 regular corps per month is mentioned under the optional admiralty rules. So the Germans aren't going to come out with their fleet, and neither are the Austrians. They can't do anything with it. Unlike in La Grande Guerre, this isn't a total sandbox. The Austrian fleet's not going to come out and blockade half of France, and the German fleet, well, they're not going to risk bringing the Brits into the war. But I may just want to use the French fleet to try to get this unit. So what I wanted to do was figure out how to move essentially on the C chart here. And unfortunately, out of all the things, you know, that are on the terrain effects chart and the player aids, support for that is notably lacking anywhere. So you have to turn to the rules for that. That's a shame. There's a good deal of most of what you need for the play. And maybe a lot of people won't be playing with that. You can optionally exclude it from the game, especially without Britain in the game. It's probably easy. Same thing with Africa. You can pull that out of the game if you don't want it. I like the worldwide war, but you know, it's pretty minor how it's covered. Okay, so let's see what the cost is. Sea chart map. Units that begin their move can move to an adjacent map hex. Where's... Port boxes cost 3, 18 movement points for an ocean box. Okay. I'm further away than the range of the German ships, so they're not going to be able to do a thing about me. If I move the fleet, and I have to move the whole damn fleet because I'm worried about those Austrian ships, unless... Oh, jeez. See, I have to find that one... Okay, so... See, this is what bugs me. If only the real dreadnought costs me, I'll send the entire French fleet with the pre-dreadnoughts and say screw it and leave the battleship behind and not spend the point for that. I don't feel like that's necessarily appropriate. Those pre-dreadnoughts should be expensive to move, but I'm not sure. Maybe the expense is the national importance of risking the modern battleships. And I don't have any errata for that, so I'm not sure which way to go with that. If I play by the rules, yeah, clearly I don't mind moving the French fleet without that. Let's see what the movement point cost is going to be. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we move out to the mid-Atlantic. So I've spent 4. Well, those pre-battleships aren't going to be able to make it beyond that, which is not good. So now I make it out to the mid-Atlantic, 18 more, so now I'm at 22, which I've exceeded these guys' movement allowance. From there, it would bring me to 25, and then I'd start moving on the Mediterranean. I can't even bring my battleship out that far. And the problem is that these Austrian ships could really interfere with a cruiser. You know, I could send a cruiser to move the French fleet, but that's not enough, and I screwed up by deploying my French fleet where I shouldn't have. You know, if I was here in Marseille, I could send that cruiser down and move him and move the troops up with no problem. But because I don't have historical deployments set up for the fleets, they give them for the land units as an option. You know, I made a big mistake, and well, the French are going to have to pay for that. And I guess they're not going to take a naval move because I really can't risk sailing a cruiser out here, and I don't have $2 available. I just don't. I have $3 total. You know, it's not worth it for me to move this unit. So that teaches you, you know, not to play a game that you've never played before and expect to do reasonable things. I could cheat and move those French fleets down, but it's too late for me for that. So screw the French. It's their own fault for playing. And honestly, I don't think either side's going to do any naval action then. So we're going to go to the campaign turn. What is our weather here in the autumn? Well, there is no weather marked. There's rain in Africa down here. Yeah, you'd have to hear Toto for that, I guess. And so we'll go to the first fortnight, and that's going to be for the Central Powers to move. Turns out I missed a rule, and that's fine. It hasn't affected me, but it affected the explanation. I was looking at, you know, the Germans are kind of cut off here in the Tannenberg sector. Why don't they just pull back? Well, and then I started thinking, you know, maybe population centers, keys, the BC's battle cruisers, whatever they're actually called, bargaining chips. I'll never remember that, especially when there are battle cruisers in the game with BC on them. If those fall, I was thinking maybe there's, you know, an effect in terms of national morale or something. No, but what there is interior fortresses. If you lose a fortress that's not on the border, you will automatically take a point of demoralization. And if you lose a battleship, another reason not to go out and engage in the big naval battle, right? You lose a level of demoralization, or you gain one, or whatever you want to say. So the idea of giving up Königsberg is not exactly attractive. I don't want to take a demoralization. That faces me with a hard choice. In terms of what I want to do with the Germans. Do I want to build some sort of, you know, cordon as I wait for troops to filter their way over towards East Germany, because, or East Prussia, I really don't have the extra money to spend on railing, although I could rail an entire force up there for just one movement point, or just one activity point, which is kind of sweet, because I could get a lot of my troops into play all at once. Likewise, it makes the Russian threat over here more significant than I realized. I kind of have to defend against them, and kind of want the Austrians to come help me. So I've got a little bit more thinking in terms of that East Prussia defense than I thought I did. Longwy does not do me any good here, and in fact, only Saint Quentin, I know that's not even a fortress. The fortresses back here become important in this second line back here. So like Verdun, Epinal. These become the important ones that the Germans want to take to demoralize the French. Just taking territory doesn't even matter. Of course, taking the capital will matter. So yeah, I have to kind of think about what my plans are down here. I've got Ludendorff, and he's really good on the offensive. But do I want to expend an activity to, you know, maybe not defeat Samsonov, and then there's still a force here. I just don't have the preponderance of force that I would like on the East Front, and that I think I will have very shortly. I don't have to take the kind of risks that Hindenburg and Ludendorff historically did, or to show the kind of brilliance that they historically did. The Russians aren't quite as far extended out, and some of that has to do with the setup. I think in the 1914 historical setup, the Russians are actually on the border and can actually make it in a fortnight deep enough that they can get cut off from supply and do something really stupid. I don't know why they would, but they could. Here they're not even able to make that dumb move. Other options, yeah. I'm kind of leaning towards the spend an activity point, or even two, to rail those forces up to the front and really begin to bring my weight to bear against the East Front. And then over here, I've got this interest in trying to crack the line somewhere. The question is where. This looks very weak right now, and it's not entrenched, so I could gain some ground there. The problem is I've got this little finger going out. There's not much I can do. We're going to assume that I'll violate Luxembourg, because there's no pain to that. I don't want to violate Belgium, obviously, because that'll bring the Brits in. But then I could get here and drop myself an infrastructure there if I want it, making, you know, it so that this hex does not cut me off completely if it falls. But alternatively, maybe I want to attack the trenches here. I'm not sure. And I'm babbling a lot more than usual because this is a couple of things. There's not a lot in terms of the actual mechanical operations that go on in the game. But there's a lot in terms of the thinking, and part of that has to do with the pulsing of the movement. The fact that you move one unit or one stack and you resolve it, and then you move on to the next stack and resolve it. I had the same kind of trouble facing things like some of the Victory Games that I love, the Vietnam and up there, and the Korean War also up there, that really, you know, get you away from the pure I go, you go. Well, this doesn't go quite as far. It's not fully pulsed, but man, I look and I'm like, you know, I thought those games were were difficult to play because you're sitting there with, okay, well, if I do something, then my opponent can react and do something else, and I'm afraid to do anything. You don't have that here, but you do have the, okay, well, look, if I do something, that there's an opportunity cost in terms of not doing something else earlier. Mainly there's a, where do I want to commit first, see what happens, and then continue on. And that kind of thing really kind of locks my poor little brain up. I don't mind it, I like it, but eventually. At first it's kind of painful, and that's why I'm struggling so much with the concept of what to do, really. When you give me pulsed games, it becomes much, much harder for me to make a decision. And, you know, whatever. So the CP turn is completed. The Germans launched a minor attack down here. Their intention is to try to reduce the French front line. They're not really looking to break through and make big gains in France. What they want to do is start destroying the fortresses, the defensive line that's here along the German border, and engage that and take that away from the French. Especially the fortresses, but I'm not really in position to do that yet. Kluck is bringing the siege artillery up into place at this point. Other forces entrenching where they could, and a little bit of movement. We've got trench units along the line, except in the areas that we've gained. So there's potential for a French counterattack to come down there, and that could be very devastating, and they may just try to take advantage of that, although they have very few forces, and it's going to be tough. Over here, I chose not to launch the attack. Instead, I shifted both units up by rail. Since I only made one attack down here, I figure I can afford to do that, and I can place myself to start crushing the Russians more heavily. The Austrians, you can see they're coming out and starting their way into Russia. I need that additional threat to put the squeeze on the Russians. Over here, all right, I may have made a screw up last time. I think I allowed Russia to spend an RP to save a Serbian unit, and they actually can't do that. You know, errors happen, right? Whatever it may represent. So over here I had an RP loss for the Montenegrins, and now they had to take it as a casualty, and now that unit's in their force pool. I don't think they can rebuild it because Montenegro has been conquered. I guess I could rebuild it over in Russia, which feels a little weird, but whatever. And I also launched an attack over on Patkul. It took the fortress at Belgrade out. I'm not sure it was a good idea to make the fortress my frontline unit, but the advantage of that is that I can give ground now without, you know, risking the fortress being taken easily. I'm still not entrenched, and that's something I really ought to be doing. So I guess that's about it. And now we move over to the Allied side of that first fortnight, and because of, there is a counter that reflects that we're still in the first fortnight over here, the seasonal counter, or the month counter. It says first FN, but that's not very apparent to me when zoom is kind of still not, it doesn't work well. It's kind of gotten healthier, or I've gotten better at using it. But anyway, to let me know where I am in the turn, because, you know, I need to be able to walk away and stuff from the game. I can't just play something like this straight through, unless I'm at a con. By the way, I did see this played at Concept World. It looked a lot smaller there. It was on a huge circular table, and it just didn't look to me like it was that big. And now it looks humongous. Maybe they had it split up with just the main European map and the other maps off to a side or something. But yeah, it's a bigger investment than I thought it was going to be. I figured it was close to the standard 2-map game, but that's cool. I like strange shaped maps. I swing around, I've got to get paid already, but I got to pay one of these. The French have done nothing over on their front. They're just, well, not nothing, but they're just spreading themselves out to try to contain the German advance. Now, this isn't going to work. The Germans are going to be able to stomp on more French spaces. I just don't have enough troops to hold the line everywhere. And that's a simple problem. I mean, I've got too many dead over here. I start out with more troops, but I took some heavy hits. And you can see, you don't need Schlieffen to start chewing up the French with those good German units. And you don't need as many German units if you don't go into Belgium. The French can't afford to stretch the line. They don't have any British support. It looks bad for them. But over here, Samsonov is going to launch this attack. So he moves forward, pays his point, gets his TI. But this is an entrenched location. And that's going to be a problem, because I can try to bring a unit with Ludendorff into place here. Now, I may not want to bring Ludendorff, except that I do. So I'm going to try to bring a reserve into play for the Germans. And I fail. I can only do this because there's a trench. And now the Germans have a 3 capability, as do the Russians, but I have Samsonov. So on a 2, Samsonov... And by the way, Ludendorff was coming in with a unit. Samsonov is going to make a roll, see if he gets his advantage. So I think we both have a 3-strength unit in the front. I have Samsonov's bonus, so I'm at +1. But I'm entrenched. Or the Germans are entrenched. Which means... let me look at the odds here. There's 3. Well, I don't have 9 units attacking, so I got 3 attacking. This is a German trench, so that's -2. This is what's terrible here. So I have very little chance of getting, you know, any kind of really good effect off of this. All I can hope for is kind of an attritional loss. But I am getting some TI out of it. And what was my note? My note was +1 for leadership, -2, so I'm at -1, so I get 6. The Russians are going to lose their main unit, and the Germans will be able to take this as a replacement loss, because we're actually in supply. If I had, you know, encircled them, they wouldn't be in supply anymore, and that would cause a problem. I may be doing that very shortly. My hope was to drive these guys off. Well, no, I can't attack them again because there's going to be a trench marker there. Okay. So anyway, I run over here. It's hard to get to everything here. The Germans have to spend one of their replacement points to not lose anything there. And we get one of these little trench battle markers. So I should have gotten here first, or maybe an attack from here. The problem is, you know, if I expose the Russians, they're going to get cut off too, so I'd have to leave units behind, etc. It's kind of hard to see whether or not, you know, maybe I can move units here. The geometry of the game, because it's unit by unit moving, it's a lot harder to grasp what you should be doing. So I'm speaking bullshit without thinking too carefully. Königsberg is held by the Germans, so I would be in supply anyway, because basically that would have to, that is I have the ability to trace to there. So I couldn't just cut it off with an attack from this direction instead. These guys are more exposed though, and there's some possibility that if I could launch an attack from here, unfortunately I'd be out of supply if I do that, and here I would be able to cut them off. But there's no easy route. The terrain just isn't giving me what I need, so I don't know what I'm going to do. Mistake I'm forgetting. Pat Cole is actually a Russian leader. I don't know if he's in this game. This is Putnik over with the Serbs, and I just see the P and it triggers a brain fart of some sort. For example, I'm seeing where I screwed up with my Russian. Samsonov's attack means he's not free to defend this space, and Ludendorff could come in 1-2 and attack from behind, and he'll be cut off from supply. Now, I can improve that. These guys moved afterwards. I'm going to move them another space forward, I think. That doesn't help. Then these guys will be cut off from supply. Ugh. If I could have attacked again in this direction, maybe I could have cleared a supply line here. These guys attacked, took this hex. It's now marked with an Entente control marker, just to remind me the Germans can't get supply there. But now this force, let me tilt these to remind me that they've moved. This force could move in here and launch an attack against these Saxons. If I do that, though, I'm out of supply because I don't have a connection running from here to that rail line in any sense of the word. I'm not adjacent anywhere. If I took this rail and this one, then I could move here and still be in supply, but that's very tenuous. I'm going to lose the lines there. So I've got some real problems with dealing with the situation, and part of it is these guys entrenched. That's just such a pain in the butt. I can't, like, you know, attack them from another direction or whatever. And it doesn't really feel like the normal kind of trench warfare where you have a line of forces holding most of the front. It feels like something kind of wacky is going on there, some reason why I can't attack that I don't quite understand. Now, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure I entirely understand, other than a design for effect type reason, why the trench warfare doesn't allow you to keep hitting, right? You know, something like Verdun, they were just bleeding each other white with attack after attack after attack, and that doesn't happen here. On the other hand, it may prevent the ridiculous losses that a game like La Grande Guerre allows, where you are allowed to just keep attacking throughout a turn. Okay. As vulnerable as I thought. I'm going to move out here, attack these Saxons, and then I have another movement point. I can move back into the woods here. It's not a perfect solution, but it does start to degrade the German position in East Prussia enough that maybe I've got a chance. I don't know. Turned out to be unsuccessful. I've pulled back from loads, getting my forces more prepared for concentrating against the Germans here. I can take this away because I'm done with the fortnight. The Russians made their attack and then withdrew back. Theoretically, this is a Russian held hex. I don't really care about it. It doesn't have any supply value, so I'm not going to mark it. I don't see any reason that it means a damn thing, actually. Just jumping in because somebody gave me a nice response. It clears something up that wasn't obvious to me from the terrain effects chart and doesn't appear, you know, maybe it's in the rules. I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case, but a lot of times I kind of skip over rules that are covered on charts and tables. I read through them the first time, but then don't really focus on that. I'm focusing on the charts and tables. Well, here I saw this kind of Alpine Pass here, and it looks like it's just dealing with mountains, and the Alpine Pass has an ARMP, but only allowing mountain core through it, whereas mountains are just ARMP. And I'm like, well, if you enter it from any other direction, then it's fine. No, what it is there's kind of a dark line here, which I didn't even notice. As I said, my eyes aren't terribly good. You know, it's particularly different. It's on a border where there's some shading. Anyway, you've got some of these things going around it that are like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure what this is. This might be the same as this, only thicker. Or it might be one of these. And I can't tell the difference, to tell you the truth. Because it's not completed. It's cut off by the rivers over here. It's, again, some of the graphical choices aren't great. Apparently there are also mountain passes, which I see over here. Unfortunately for me, I don't know if I see any. If I run across them, they kind of negate the regular mountain cost for moving in through that hex side. But I can't see any of them. Oh, there they are. There they are. Okay. Anyway, you know, again, you get kind of used to certain graphical conventions, etc. And when you're looking at a very different new map like this, yeah, sometimes it's not absolutely clear. And again, whatever those are that are prohibited movement, there it is, red hex side. Okay. So this is our red hex side. Yeah, it just doesn't really jump out to me. Now that I know to look for it, I look for it. But, you know, here it looked like it was on the border of water, says it's impassable. Hey, okay, you know, that's where I'm going to expect to see them, not up in the mountains where they kind of blended in the way they did. Anyway, I probably just, you know, didn't even pay attention. Okay, so another correction was discovered. Apparently my leadership roles, I've been making them less than or equal. They're less than. Trying to see if there's anyone with a 1 that would... Yeah, isn't there? No, I don't know. I don't see one with a 1, but whatever. It doesn't really make much difference, right? I mean, it skews the odds a little bit, but the leadership advantage is obviously a fairly heavily subjective thing in terms of the values given, etc. There might be a balance issue at play, but I wouldn't worry about it too much there. But what does bug me about it is that that's a less than or equal to, and I think, unless I'm mistaken, committing the reserve, or no, that's a less than. Committing the reserves, I think, is less than or equal to. Yeah, the errata made it less than or equal to. You know, I'm sure the numbers are carefully balanced, etc., to some extent. Especially on the reserve commitment, I would assume that errata is for an important reason. Originally, they were both less thans, so maybe the decision was made after some additional playthrough to tinker the one but not the other. But to tell you the truth, in general, values like that, they should all be consistent across the board. Like, if you're always rolling less than, it ought to just be what it is, you know? I know it's hard to cope with, I mean, especially where errata changes things. But that kind of consistency is kind of important, and I probably am better off trying to keep playing it wrong than about half the time getting it right, you know? Especially since, like I said, the leadership is such a subjective concept that I'm not too worried about it. Bringing troops in as reserve is somewhat less subjective. You can see where that effect would actually take place and how much that benefits the defender, etc. I think the advantage of, say, Ludendorff being good on 5 out of 6 attacks or 4 out of 6 attacks is such a small thing. Or the difference of Conrad being good in 1 out of 6 or 2 out of 6 attacks. Again, it's a small enough thing if everybody's consistent across it. But if I start... Anyway. Just my argument for consistency in the thing. And I can see it's probably because the errata tweaked one and... You know, too late for the counters to be updated because the rulebook's already printed. You know it. I use Ludendorff to make the high-risk attack. I've got Samsonov pinned up against here. So I swing around, I'm in supply from here. Samsonov is not in supply. He can't trace down the German territory. So now he's hit. I get a big roll. I was at +3 or so. The result ended up as RP 3 with a breakthrough. Now the breakthrough doesn't mean a hell of a lot here. Because I don't have the fortification, the entrenchment there, I believe. Let me make sure, but that's, I believe. So, if it fails to meet the above achievements, it gets to be a GG instead of a breakthrough, which is going to force Samsonov to retreat. And I don't hit those above because I didn't remove all the defending units, and the attacker was, well, he was not counterattacking a breach, but I didn't remove all the defending units, so I don't get the effect of the breakthrough. The breakthrough wasn't going to make much difference because this wasn't entrenched anyway. But now I have the bonus of making a demoralization check. And here we have a nice less than signified right in the player aid. So the Russians get a demoralization point if I can find them. This is the Russian. These are hard for me to view, the little pictures on them. Again, another case where I don't feel like the graphic design did a great job. The counters are especially bothersome to me in this whole thing. But again, you know, Compass has regularly made counters that I just don't feel artistically are very effective. Okay, now I've got a retreat of 1 to 3 hexes. I don't know what my retreat rules are, so I'm gonna have to look to see if I can kind of curve around and run back this way or something. I think I probably can, because retreat of 1 to 3, it's my choice how far. I've got to go at least a hex, but you know, this curving around the enemy is kind of weird. That's all I have to say about it. But I suspect I'm freely allowed to retreat. Turns out there actually are some restrictions. I can't retreat next to this if I can avoid it. So my first retreat is going to be in this direction. That's 1. Now I got 2 more hexes. Now, I can actually retreat through marshes and trees and everything without any problem. It's a route. I don't know. This map with the table sticking out the way it is makes it difficult for me to find my rule book, because I can't keep it in one place. I'm blocked by impassable terrain. Enemy units are stacking limits, however. But other than that, I'm allowed to go through marshes. I'm not. There's no order of that prevents me from doing that. So I've got kind of choices. I want to stay near the railway so that I'm in supply, unless I move next to a population center. So that was my first retreat. I think my second will be into this forest here, and I'll stop there because I can't. This is a fully stacked hex. I can't go into here. Oh, a terrible command mix-up happened. The Germans sent their artillery out to the east front, and I really wanted it up in the west. I'm going to put that up there with leaving the French stuck in North Africa and just keep rolling with it. And I forgot the Samsonov suicide check or whatever. Not a special rule for Samsonov, just a leader removal. The number I was aiming at was a 6, so there's 2 ways you can interpret that rule. It's either roll less than the original die roll, or I think more likely, roll less than the target number for the die roll. And that makes it very unlikely if you take a big loss that you'll still have your leader. So Samsonov is gone from the game. And he does not go over to the force pool. He would go to the force pool if his force was eliminated, and he wasn't. Central Powers, Austria does not launch another attack. They only have 1 buck left. They do shift around and strengthen their positions in case the Russians want to attack them. You can see the Germans pushing down. I've started putting control markers along the rail lines just so that I know where I'm getting my supply from. See, we cleared out the Russian one here, getting ourselves into a more solid position in general there. Now, I got Africa if I want to play around there too. I forgot about that. Over here, we made an attack into Verdun, and from this direction there was a trench attack, so only one round of it. But actually, yeah, that was from this direction. We had an attack across the river from these guys, clearing our way towards whatever this is here, Maubeuge, and threatening the fortress and weakening the French line by gaining that ground there. These attacks were expensive. The Germans took an extra unit that they didn't have to. They killed a cav unit. Now they got to rebuild that. That's going to cost 2 replacement points, but I wanted to keep 1 just in case I get an opportunity to save a lead unit that's good or something. And my TI is up to 8 already. It's not going to be very long before I have lots of TI if I can keep attacking at this rate, right? Yeah, that is beginning to feel like that's accumulating rather quickly. As far as I can see, though, let me relook the rolls because maybe I'm missing something. Increases by 1 after each major battle that you attack in. And it doesn't look like it requires entrenchment or anything like that. It looks like we're going to hit the TI pretty quickly. Though to be fair, you're certainly seeing it in 1917. But you may be seeing initial TIs in 16, and that may be the somewhere or another there's a chart for this. Doesn't seem to be on here. We got like the diplomacy, which seems less important. The TI chart is over here. Oh, it's baked into the table, so that you have less of a chance of getting the TI advantages. Let me make sure that Germans don't want to do anything over here in Africa. I think we'll entrench. The French didn't build an infrastructure, so they're not really... well, they can afford to attack, because if they take the hex, then they have a supply source there, and they kill the unit. So that's of interest to them. Up here, I'll entrench here too. Just because the Allies aren't going to be able to... I want to make sure that I don't get attacked, by the Brits if they somehow come into the war, if I make a decision that they have to come in. In the French sector, we've just kind of spread out even further, trying to catch up here. We're going to be able to build in here. We're hoping that we have enough to kind of keep the Germans from pushing forward. They're clearly not as big an advance as they made historically, but they're doing it with a lot less troops. They sent a couple of stacks and their damn siege artillery. Oops. Over here, the French took Douala in the Cameroon. That's a supply source for them, so they're not out of supply sitting up there. They got thrown into an entrenched formation, so they're going to have to kind of mobilize again to get moving. That's what happens when you attack entrenched units. Over here, the Russians did a horrible attack and lost. It wasn't a bad odds. They got a terrible roll. They were out like -2 because of the entrenchments. And they lost heavily and ended up mostly entrenched. The top unit is not. That moved in from the forest afterwards. But they ended up with another demoralization check, and they succeeded in becoming more demoralized. And over here, they launched a mobile attack here, which wasn't so bad. They actually managed to do 2 attacks. Hey, that's great, The Russians had a lot of money. They produced quite a bit, as long as Turkey's not in the war, so they can do a lot. It may not be terribly effective what they do, but it is pumping up their TI power. And, they're causing some attritional losses to the Germans. Took out a big unit, took out the last point as well. And they basically got one decent roll and one lousy roll first, then the decent roll. So that worked pretty well for them. It looks like I've used up all the video again, probably too much blathering. At least all that I want to do. Aerodrome Commissariat. What are we going to commiserate about here? Everybody is in supply, I believe. Let me look carefully. The Russians slipped away everywhere. They own this hex. I just don't have it marked. Probably should. If I'm marking some of the hexes, it's going to confuse me if I don't mark them all. I'll catch that later maybe. And then over here, we have this rail line, so the Germans are still all in supply. A friend of mine over on the Game Box mentioned that he got in a bit of dispute with the rules with the designer of the game, having to do with Romania and an excess bridge, I assume, coming over. Jeez, I can't read what this is. That's the Danube. I thought it was another river. Might be this tributary here. And that maybe it was kind of the designer, I didn't really read too much about it, but his take on it was the designer basically said, look, it's an abstracted game, you don't have to worry about that. And he's writing a game, this one guy over, on the Romanian campaign, and is particularly interested in this and particularly disturbed to see a rail line going where he knows that there's no bridge. And maybe came up with arguments having to do with how difficult it was to, ferry materials across the river, etc. Yeah, that may all be, but remember the scale that this game is. Now, he's not familiar with the rules of the game, so, he's looking at it from a different perspective than the designer is, where the particular scale of the game is saying, hey, if you're anywhere next to a rail line, you're essentially on a rail line, in terms of you can draw your supply, etc. And that's all that it's really saying, is that if you're going to ship any materials across these rivers, you need the marker there. And, it's just for tracing supply more than anything else. And while, yes, the line maybe shouldn't be there, or maybe it was a city on the wrong side of the river, I don't know. In any case, it really doesn't make all that much difference. This really is that abstracted in a lot of ways, and you don't want to get into too much detail about how much is being represented here. It is a fairly abstract representation compared to what you may be used to with some other games. Anyway, let's send this up.